Here we are for another bonus round of the 70s versus the 90s, and this round is dedicated to the great Michael Madsen. And in this round, we have Sidney Lumet's Serpico versus Mike Newell's Donnie Brasco. And this one was a real hard one to get to. It was at the heart of it. It's Pacino versus Pacino. So let's just dive right in. Sidney Lumet's Serpico, of course, based on a true story of the titular character that Al Pacino plays, and the film itself, it's not really like Pacino's best performance, but you can see him like, really coming into his own as an actor. Because I mean, this is still early on in his career. It's only like the right after The Godfather, and even before The Godfather, he'd only really did like The Panic in Needle Park as far as films go. But he was on his way up doing more films, and this one was kind of a departure from the kind of shit that he would get typecast as. Because he usually gets cast in like gangster parts or like weird like romantic dramas and shit. But at the heart of it though, like he has to carry the whole movie, because like he is like, he's not only playing the titular character, but most of the actors in it are not that great. They're just the New York actors that they could get at the time, probably for cheap. And like there's other ones like Tony Roberts is great in it, and then the guy that comes in later in the investigation is giving him shit like friends in the department, who needs friends and all this shit. And I'm not that dude's great, but that's just like one scene, out of like a lot of like random ass shit. And I kind of feel they cram a lot of shit into the film, a lot of time and space. But we see right off the bat that the Serpico is a guy that clearly wants to do good. And he's, soon finds out he's in a world that doesn't give a fuck if he does good or not, because everybody's on the take and everybody's corrupt. And even the ones that aren't corrupt or on the take, they don't give a fuck about like dealing with it. It's kind of the status quo. Don't fucking rock the boat and all this fucking shit, but Serpico doesn't give a shit. He's still trying to do good. And, they think he's weird. There's a point in the movie where they think he's gay, or like, because they assume that he's sucking dudes off in the bathroom, and really it's just the guy like peeping Tom and tells him to turn the fucking lights off and shit. It's just real weird shit like that. And he ends up like dating an actress, dancer, and all this shit. And you kind of see the drama with that. But honestly, those scenes are not as like powerful as the ones when he's with the cops and shit, and he's dealing with motherfuckers that are weirded out because he's not taking money, or motherfuckers that, well, I'll hold on to it, but really they're just spending it and shit. It's very layered. But Sidney Lumet, even at that time, still, he'd been in the game for a while. I mean, he came up through television in the 50s and had a string of films in the 60s that were like movies like The Pawnbroker that were pushing boundaries and stuff. But this one doesn't really push any boundaries. It just tries to make a biopic that's not boring as shit, and it almost succeeds, because there's moments that really just kind of drag in this film, and Pacino kind of just yells his way through the performance. It doesn't seem to be any real danger in the film. Is him yelling and whining about, all these cops are going to try to kill me, and it's like, honestly, I'm surprised they didn't try to kill him sooner than that. That the assassination attempt that opens the movie. And, very brilliantly crafted. I mean, it is well written. Waldo Salt was one of the writers on the script. So, that guy's no slouch. But at the end of the day, like, Pacino can only do so much, especially that early on in his career. You can't really, like, ask too much of him. And so, like, you moving forward to, like, Donnie Brasco, where he's older and he's, this time he's playing a gangster. And now, like, you got Johnny Depp playing an undercover cop. And, Johnny Depp, might even be a better actor than Pacino. He definitely holds his own. And, and with this, Pacino doesn't have to carry the whole fucking movie, because not only is there Johnny Depp to go along with it, but you've also got Michael Madsen, who's incredible in the film, Bruno Kirby, James Russo, and even Anne Heche, who plays Johnny Depp's wife. And she's got to deal with him being an undercover cop, never being there, And I feel like that balance was done a lot better than it was in Serpico. But whereas, like, Serpico was never really undercover either, kind of in a capacity of like, I'm not, I'm keeping track of all this shit. I'm trying to expose it, but, you know, nobody ever knows for sure if he's a rat or not. You know, they just really assume they're ready to cut his nuts off and shit. Whereas, like, Johnny Depp is so good at, like, charming Al Pacino's character and, you know, getting into this world and really, like, taking on the nuances of everything and just picking shit up quick, you know, that even when they find out he's a Fed, they don't even fucking believe it. But that whole dynamic between Al Pacino and Johnny Depp, it's like a real father-son thing, because you see him with his actual son, and he, you know, on that Christmas Day scene, and, you know, you see him like respond more to Johnny Depp, who's like kind of now his surrogate son. You know, he finally found the son that he wanted, you know, and then there's also that kind of betrayal, because then he sees, you know, the kid that he thought, you know, he was mentoring and bringing up, now he's outdoing him and shit, you know, and even Johnny Depp's character, we see that descent, you know, perfectly, like, you know, it's not really overacted, it's not overstated or anything, you know, we just see him like care more and more for Al Pacino's character, and he, you know, even the life, he learns to respect the life, you know, they both the feds and the gangsters want him to shave the fucking mustache because it's not regulation, you know, isn't that fucking funny, you know, and there's not much difference of anything, you know, I feel, you know, there are some weird moments in this, like when the fucking feds tell the gangsters that fucking Donnie Brasco's a Fed, you know, that's a little fucking weird. I guess they're trying to get him murked. I don't fucking know. Like, you know, plausible deniability, you know, why, maybe he was an embarrassment. I don't fucking know, but he got like over 200 indictments according to the little postscript at the end of the movie and shit. You know, and it also kind of deals with, it shows that fucking, well, what was it all for a lot better than Serpico, you know, because like Serpico, you know, he exposed all this shit, got shot in the face, survived that shit, you know, and then finally got his goddamn gold shields, like, I don't fucking want it, moves to fucking Switzerland, you know, because like for what all of that, it's still fucking corruption, nothing really got fixed, you know, and it's kind of the same thing with Donnie Brasco. You get a fucking medal and $500, you know, you just kind of risked your whole fucking life for this fucking shit, and that's the kind of thanks you get, you know. So I guess I gotta give it to Donnie Brasco on this one. I think so. The 90s win another round, you know, because honestly, Donnie Brasco's more of an enjoyable film, which is kind of weird because like Sidney Lumet's a better director than Mike Newell. Mike Newell doesn't usually do this type of shit. This is the guy that brought us such movies as Four Weddings and a Funeral, and so like and Enchanted April. But then he does this fucking very subdued gangster film. It's like toned down Scorsese almost, you know. And, you know, honestly, it gets the job done, you know, and it's more entertaining, it's more vibrant than Serpico. Because if you're going to, biopics, by definition, are usually boring as fuck. That's why, like, gangster movies are so popular, like biopics that are fun, you know. And I wouldn't necessarily say Donnie Brasco's fun, but it definitely, like, keeps you more awake than Serpico does. And so, and plus, like, you know, Pacino doesn't even yell through the performance. You know, if Pacino's yelling through a performance, it's usually not that good. He usually doesn't know where to put his shit in, you know, because like that scene in Serpico where he's like fucking, I can shout anywhere, when he's in the fucking coffee house with it, trying to get his lady back, you know, and that's true. So he can fucking shout anywhere, and he will. But when he doesn't, you can see truly the nuances of the performances. What he conveys with just his face and Donnie Brasco is fucking amazing. So I like I said, Donnie Brasco fucking wins this round, because definitely better Pacino than you get in Serpico. But that is very different, you know, see an actor early in their career still coming into their own, and then, you know, have about 20 years later, you know, seasoned and know what the fuck you're doing. And then also, like, working with one of the more vibrant younger actors of that time. And so for anybody keeping score, that is 13-11. 70s are still up, but only by 2. The 90s are catching up. You know, that's what I can't underestimate the 90s, you know. For all the trash they put out, sometimes they'll put out a movie that you're just like, damn, that was really good. It was really refreshing. And, you know, even, you know, no takeaway from the 70s, you know, something like Serpico, they still had not perfected the art of making a fun biopic. They really didn't get that. You know, Scorsese's the one that kind of unlocked that formula and set the tone for like modern biopics after the 70s, you know. So it definitely wasn't Sidney Lumet, and Serpico is far from his best work, and it far from his worst work either, you know. So, you know, this is definitely heating up. I'm throwing a lot of these bonus rounds in, you know, just because, like I said, I got shit planned out all the way through fucking February, but I want to like have more. I want to just do it all because I have so many of these matchups in mind, and I gotta know who's the best. You know, I know that everybody's hungry for content, and you know, if you got any suggestions out there in YouTube land, fucking throw them at me because I may already have them, and I'll fucking throw that. That'll be my bonus rounds and shit. But the main events always happen usually on Saturdays. And the next main event is Jaws versus Lake Placid, the hitters to end all hitters, you know, so that one's going to be a fun one. And, you know, like I said, I'm having fun mapping out the rough draft of my doctoral thesis and shit. You know, like I said, I have no life. That's why I've been doing more and more of these, you know, just stuck in a hole of fucking a movie void type thing. But it's all for science or academics, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But this one was a real surprise. 13-11. 70 still up by 2, but who fucking knows, man? So we'll keep them coming at you. And, you know, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. I could give a fuck less. I'll respond to it all. I may even do a video about it. You know, fuck the internet, fuck movies, fuck everything. I'm tearing it down. I'm figuring out who's the best, which one's the best decade, 70s or 90s. Heating up, baby.